All righty, welcome to the NerdBrand Podcast, everybody. On this episode, we're going to talk a little bit about ADA compliance for web.
What does ADA compliance mean?
I don't really have memorized what ADA means, but most people understand that's
Americans with Disabilities Act.
Thank you.
It's a law.
Yeah. If you own a brick and mortar, for example, and you have a bathroom, you should have rails in the bathroom. I know right now Robert's like, wait, what? He's fine. But most places don't really consider or think about people that have disabilities or partial disabilities. But anyways, as we go on, I'm your host, Jason Davis. This is Mitch Gregory, and this is Jonathan Payne. And we're the nerds. We don't open the show consistently every time on purpose.
It's because we're so nerdy.
And Mitch never says anything, even though we're doing audio.
I know it. He's always like doing the finger pointing as if everybody knows like something's happening in that corner.
There's things I do for the audience that listen. There's things I do for the audiences that watch.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Well, we'll just recommend you go to YouTube and watch Mitch do finger guns. Cause
There you
audio
go.
version. There you go. You get the pew pew. It's kind of like when people talk about when they make movies and special effects. The actors are always there doing the like sound effects, and then the producers are like, "Shut up! We'll add it in post."
I remember
I've been on so many movie sets in my life.
a long time ago. You brought this to mind. A long time ago, I was watching a documentary on the making of Star Wars, the original movie, and there was Han Solo.
You messed up.
It was when they were doing the gunfight on the Death Star when they were trying to escape the Death Star.
Yeah.
And Harrison Ford's walking around going, "Pow, pow, pow," and I never understood why they were doing that. And I guess it's because that's what told the audio engineer
Sequences.
That's where they're going to insert the sound effect.
Yeah.
I thought that was so funny. So now when I watch a movie and there's a gunfight, in my head I see the guy going, "Pow, pow."
Well, when Guardians of the Galaxy came
Whammo.
out, Chris Pratt, he was making sound effects, and he was told to stop it because they were like, "We don't need you to do that." Pew, pew, pew. Yeah, he was actually doing like a pew 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 when he was running around. Anyways, not on
Those
topic
were pretty
about.
good, guys.
Yeah, not
We've covered it.
Yeah, totally down a rabbit trail there, but that's okay. That's material. So anyways, yeah, ADA compliance for web has always been a very hotly debated topic because there's no laws that in a way that will get the Justice Department or other federal authorities involved to prosecute you. Let me just say that. However, that does not mean that in civil court or in private cases they could be leveraged against you as a site owner, a website owner. Mm-hmm. And that has happened over the years. We were just talking about brands like, we can say this because they're not around anymore. It's like when Dixie was.
They're around.
Oh, they're still around?
In the South, yes.
Okay.
Florida.
Yeah, so they went through this. A couple pizza chains went through this. And, ADA compliance for web goes beyond contrast of colors. It goes beyond the size of the font on the page. And disabilities is not solely pigeonholed into somebody who's blind. It could be somebody who has a partial disability. So you could even have somebody who is colorblind. That would be considered something that you need to watch for, hence the reason for color contrast. And John, earlier you had asked me, you said something about like particular colors that a brand should think about when developing their brand or revising it or adding it. An example of that would be in a paragraph of copy. Typically, the design would be to highlight the text as a color, and that color would signify that as a link. Well, in ADA compliance, if it's not underlined, and if it's a red, they may not, who's colorblind, or maybe not red, maybe it's green or whatever. I'm not colorblind, so I don't know. But that may not be a color they see.
Right.
So they don't even recognize as they're reading a paragraph that there's a call to action there. And I don't mean like click here or things like that. I mean just like just highlighted text that takes them to an external source. They may just miss it. And then there's also alt text that is not just on images, it's also on anchor links. And that informs the reader, if they're using one, that, and I don't mean reader like
screen reader.
Screen reader, that, hey, there's a link here. And this is what it says and where it goes. Mm-hmm. And that belongs in the alt text. And so that informs that. It's very difficult and way more expensive to develop and create a website from a design perspective and development and code that is ADA compliant. And many people, I had the other day, somebody said they were talking about a $3,000 website. And I'm like, Well, there's about 3-4 days of work that covers.
Right.
There's about 10 grand not there that should be, at least to start on that. And I know that creates,
Depending on your market.
yeah, and that does create a lot of eyeballs to probably go, oh my God. But honestly, and this is not a scare tactic for sales at all from us, but what is more important, to spend that kind of money up front on a site that has scalability and has some of this compliance in it? Or would you rather deal with lawyers and lawsuits later if something comes out because you've started going down the path of franchising, and now people are more aware of the brand and more people are using the site, more people are arriving, and you're like, uh-oh, I forgot to install parking spaces that are marked, because that's usually like what every business owner thinks of. You got a brick and mortar, you're thinking of like, I need this many
ramps.
Yeah, you're thinking of physical stuff.
I need a ramp out front. I need this many handicap parking spaces.
The sign has to be so far off the ground. That's a regulation for that as well. That is on that. If there's a handicap spot and there's the sign on the pole, that's got to be so many feet off the ground. That's a regulation. But no one thinks about the detail about that. They just think I need a parking space with a sign on it. Well, to translate that to web, most people think, well, I got a website, and that's all it stops. It stops there. But people with disabilities, they can't use it.
Right.
So,
and I think I looked it up. I can't remember the statistics at all, but I was shocked at how many people in the United States are considered vision impaired. And I'm not talking about people who wear glasses, but vision impaired, where they would have difficulty viewing and using a website without some type of assistance, or without the website being much more compliant than most websites are.
yeah.
And it was like a staggering, 35%.
Well, I mean,
like
I qualify into that. I can't speak for Mitch, but, when you get past 40, your eyeballs need some assistance on top of the glasses, and you need bifocals. And I've gone to many websites that are online stores, and the copy, the text, the links in the footer, particularly because footers and websites are treated like a sitemap, they're so tiny, I'm having to nose up, and I can barely read them. And I know that as a web person and savvy and technical, I can just scale up
a little bit.
Yeah, Command Plus or whatever,
Right,
and
right.
I can make it I can make it bigger on my end, but
Right.
that is not an escape to say it's compliant. That's like having a WordPress site and saying like, oh, I'll put an ADA plugin on there. That is not the fix. That is a step, but that's not the fix. So this, I think it was the 18th of March, the Justice Department has issued guidelines. These are guidelines. These are not regulations. Regulation, that means difference. So they're very clear in the verbiage that the Justice Department cannot prosecute because of this, basically. Okay, now I'm not a lawyer, so none of this information
Yeah, we'll
on
put
this
a
podcast,
disclaimer.
that's what I'm getting to. None of this information on this podcast should be taken as legal advice or expertise, because we are not lawyers in this matter.
Please consult a licensed attorney.
Yeah, I want to make that absolutely clear, and that will also be clear in our YouTube description.
I think it was pretty clear before.
Yeah, but the point
Just
is
to be safe.
Yeah, and I'm not being humorous with this, because there is the implication that this could be taken as such, and it is absolutely not. I don't want anybody coming back and saying, "Well, NerdBrand said." No, there are many. This is a 30-minute show. You're not going to get that kind of advice in a show like that. So the idea of what a regulation versus guidelines, it's pretty obvious. Guidelines are, we recommend you do this.
We strongly
For
recommend.
the
Yes.
good of humanity.
Yes, but the FBI is not going to knock on your door because you don't have a website that's ADA compliant. That's not going to happen. Doesn't mean it won't one day, but that's not going to happen. There are, as of 2017, and I'll be sending out an email to all the folks at NerdBrand. John's actually checking that email for spelling and grammar, but I will be sending out an email internally to our team to discuss that as of 2017 there are agencies that have been tasked for investigation, so that if a lawsuit does come to bear, they contact that agency to file a complaint, and the lawyers go through that agency. So like agriculture or whatever, education, these are things that exist. Now, do you need to state on your website, we are ADA compliant? You better be, because that's going to fire off a lawyer who's pretty savvy with Google that's looking for statements on websites, and then they're going to test that. So I don't really recommend that personally. But if you're in education or anything like that, politics, government, yeah, you kind of have to. But you need to make sure there is a contact and a form, and somebody's watching that, and that should be your chief communication officer. So there's certain steps that are lined out. The government has put up a new site that's very clearly listed as beta, in the beta stage, which is really interesting to see. It is a .gov.
Is it ADA compliant?
Yes, it is a .gov.
You never know.
Yeah, well, no, you never know. But ADA compliance doesn't mean that your site has to be boring graphics, boring colors. There are tools to use for this. And I'm doing a lot of talking, and I kind of feel like I shouldn't because there's two other folks here.
Yeah. I mean, that was what that was going to kind of be a question that I had was, I mean, because I've looked at this from a very high level. But it makes me wonder if and this almost seems like taking a step back 10 years, but maybe you have a site that's designed for people, a version of your site that's available for people that are visually impaired.
No, you can't do that.
Or can't hear. I mean, there's lots of different
Jason said
disabilities.
You can't do that.
You cannot do that.
Why?
Because that's sort of like I have this business, brick and mortar, that everybody else can use and go into and walk into, but then I've got this other one down the street for everybody else. That just screams 1960s segregation. You just can't do that. That's discrimination.
Well, I was only speaking from a usability standpoint. I mean, one that's
you're talking about reasonable accommodation.
Yeah,
right, exactly.
Yeah,
exactly.
Your job is the web, and this is a philosophy of NerdBrand that's very deeply rooted, but the web is for everyone. It doesn't matter if you're blind, if you're not able to walk. I mean, there's people that may not have use of limbs and they can't use a mouse. The web is for everyone, and the web should be made for everyone to be able to easily use and access. And so when you start to create another site, you're segregating, you're separating. That is actually what's happening. And you don't want to do that, but also at the same time, legally, no, that's not going to hold up because places have tried that. And they're like, no, you can't do that. You can't have a site. If you're a hotel, you can't have one site for everybody who's disabled and another site for everybody that's fine. Just to book a room?
Right.
No, that's not going to fly.
Well, you don't want that either as a business.
Yeah, there's civil rights
Managing
organizations that are
I was only speaking from a usability standpoint because you're trying to better meet the needs of people who have require special accommodation.
Yeah. I mean, you're thinking in the lines of like not to do those things. You're thinking in the lines of like, well, how can I accommodate this while not sacrificing certain things about the qualities of the brand or the colors?
Well, or to meet, like I said, just meet everybody's needs in a way that best fits their ability or inability.
But see,
that
kind of goes back into when we talk about colors and contrast, there are tools to check. Now, here's the funny thing. If you don't have brand standards,
right,
and you don't go back to your Pantones,
right,
and then develop your hex codes in web, like you're already on a path.
Guessing.
Yeah, you're guessing because hex codes in web can be abacadabra 1, 2, 4, whatever. Like literally, it's a wheel. You can pick whatever comes out. But if you take that hex code, 9 times out of 10, it's probably not going to track back to a Pantone.
Not exactly. I mean, there's a hex code for every Pantone color, but there's not a Pantone color for every hex code.
I think you kind of made my argument, but in reverse.
Right. Sorry.
But the point is, you don't start with hex codes and work back to Pantone. If you've done that, then you're kind of like you just can't make ADA compliance on your site solely looking through that keyhole of the hex codes. You have to start with your standards. You have to go to the Pantones. You have to start working with color in that way. There's been some instances, but very rare, where color was chosen from Pantone and worked up to for web, because it's like with print, print CMYK. And so there's these other standards. You have to have these so that if ADA compliance comes up in web, we're not applying a color that if the text on the button is one color and the button is another color, and then you hover over that button and it becomes another color, are those colors and the contrast of them, if you're colorblind, can you see it? Do you recognize that there's been a change? Can you even read it? Can you read the text? So there's font size that goes into that, the size of the button itself. So there's various things that happen in adjusting that design element, that one button alone. There's tools to look at that will cause you to change the color or change the font size. And that will get you somewhere between level A or level AA for ADA compliance. And there are levels. Level AAA is pretty much a black and white web page. There's no images, and that's it. So AAA is like unobtainable in my opinion, but that's just my opinion.
I think you mentioned alt text too, and I see a lot of sites where they'll, even on like the Twitter icon, it'll say an image of a blue bird, and that's not useful.
No, it's
that's not the proper
Yeah.
way to use alt. So there are tons of blog posts and guides out there if people are curious, and if they are in web or they're like a marketing coordinator or something, to go read those and figure out how to use alt text, because that's a big one that a web designer's not really going to touch. Well, they do.
No, you're right.
But
No,
a
web
lot of
designer
marketing
doesn't-
coordinators
Yeah.
go in there, or a website owner, or just the owner of the company. It's not that hard to comprehend, but don't start your alt text with an image. They know that. The screen reader does that, so it becomes an image of whatever.
Very good point to bring up. Yeah.
I just read all about that, trying to because I've been writing alt text for years, but I'll be honest, I've been kind of winging it, and you shouldn't.
No, you shouldn't, because it'll come back and bite you. You look like you were going to say something.
No.
Oh. But yeah, alt text. Also, too, you don't want to get too wordy.
Right.
Like if you're shoving a paragraph in there.
Well, and it's only for things too, right? That you can correct me, but it's only for images that actually have some useful
Yes.
validity to be on the page. If it's just purely for decoration, you shouldn't have an alt tag on it, right?
Yeah,
Alt
you
text.
don't. Yeah, and there's a beautiful content management system that actually does some of this for you, that lets you know this and provides the tools for you, and it's called WordPress.
What's that?
And yeah, I know, right? Because there's other DIY tools, and I won't name the list. There's so many out there. They all run ads, and the question I have is, because they're putting those tools in the hand of the normal, like, I'm trying to create an elitist environment or anything here, or saying anything arrogant.
A
but
layperson.
Yeah, a layperson. Thank you. That they're not. These are the minute details. Like we've talked about web design and development and purpose before, but now we're getting into things that can cause you a legal problem. So you have to really now think about even really harder about these things, which means that an ADA compliant site is going to cost a lot more money. But in the long run, again, I can't state enough, remediating that site is way more expensive. But also being sued is way beyond that. That's an out of business, you're done type scenario possibly.
So
Even an institution like a higher ed, I mean, it can wreck a financial situation.
Mm-hmm.
So a question, are there particular websites that are more, what am I trying to say, where ADA compliance is more vital at the moment than maybe others?
Yes. Because of what's happened recently, as of this month, with the Justice Department making these statements and putting this out there, which we'll provide a link in the description on YouTube. The agricultural, anything that's really accessible by the public, right, is supposed to be.
Right.
But if you're a hotel, if you're in education like higher ed, or if you're in even if you're K through 12, especially K through 12, I think that you'll be like one of the first ones that should be paying attention to this, because kids. Hotels, hospitality, anything in travel is like that, because they use a lot of imagery.
Mm-hmm.
Anybody that's sort of like providing something for the public, like even if you think about PDFs, there's a lot of municipalities that have to have the minutes recorded for the meetings,
Right.
Mm-hmm.
and those really don't need to be pretty, but they also need to be like probably at the AAA level, I would say, of compliance, where it's just text. There's no images on there.
Right.
We've seen a lot of PDFs where we're
Mhm.
like, yep, you found Microsoft Publisher yesterday. You don't want to do that unless you're doing like what John said. Like if it's got a purpose, then it better have a description. You can actually put that in the PDF. But at the end of the day, do you really need to?
Are there certain ways to kind of, I don't know, save a PDF so that it is readable with a screen reader versus, because I mean, it's an image, right?
Yeah, well, it's a
PDF.
document.
Right.
Have you seen like, I think one, and I could be corrected, and our listeners out there could do that, but I've always been interested in Adobe Creative Suite and how they seem to be deprecating the Save for Web function. Have you noticed that in like Photoshop and Illustrator?
Yeah.
I
It's
use the
like-
legacy version.
Yeah, they call it Legacy now. But when you would do it, it would give you all kinds of useful information about what you're saving for web
Mhm.
that's embedded in that object. Because here's a scary fact in web. If you grab a PNG or a GIF or a JPEG off the internet and save it to your computer, like viruses can be embedded through PHP code in that image. So you shouldn't do that unless you really trust the source you're getting it from. And so there's data that can go into an object like that. And that could maybe possibly be read by an assistant tool of some sort. It's a metadata.
Right.
So yeah, and that Save for Web, I think, would show some of that. So when you would save a PDF, it definitely, I remember there's a box that says what this is, what kind of document it is, but it doesn't really like summarize like the content or anything in it. So
gotcha. I don't know if there were different PDFs, because I've seen some that are, you can't highlight the text. So I'm assuming you had a screen reader.
Well,
that wouldn't be compliant.
Or the text has been before the PDF was made. Whatever document was made from, the text was converted. Well, in the process of making the PDF, you can convert text to art, so that's not text anymore.
Yeah. Because when Mitch sends a PDF with art on it for like a logo, and I upload that to like Moo or Vista for like say a business card, and he's got on the PDF a front and back, Moo's like, oh, I get this. That's the front. That's the back. You pick the thing. It's embedded. That a PDF is like a very dynamic, pseudo-dynamic
kind
document.
of an amazing document when you think about it.
Yeah. So how you handle those is part of compliance. Yeah. So
I love PDFs.
Yeah. Well, imagine if you have a website and you have a bunch of PDFs on it that are case studies or whatever, and you got like 20 of them, and none of them are compliant. And you approach an agency and say, I need this remediated to have all these documents compliant. Well, it's $500 a document.
Yeah.
It starts to add up.
Yeah.
But how much does a lawyer cost? So take your pick. But the problem is to fix it at the beginning. It's sort of like when you buy a house. If you buy a house without having it inspected, that's on you. But if the inspector comes in and says, that's got mold, man, you dodged a bullet.
Right.
But if you have a house already, mold happens. The inspection to find it costs money. The remediation of that costs way more money. In fact, it's at the point where you can't even maybe live there. And then if you don't deal with it, well, oops.
That costs too.
Yeah, other things.
Yeah. The hospital's also expensive.
Yeah. So you really have to think about that in this way. That's why I want to emphasize, like, it's not a scare tactic to sell web services to people, because we don't do that just for the sale. But it's something that when we make the argument like, maybe not put that white text on that red button, there's a reason, because it's hard to see. It's a contrast issue. And there are tools that actually can show you that.
Yep.
But it's kind of like when we talk about SEO, there's no golden egg that's going to fix it all. And that's the misconception with some of the tools. Well, if I have this tool on my site, it's compliant and nobody will bother me. Wrong.
It's probably the opposite, because like you said, there are vultures, there are ambulance chasers
exactly
in this industry going after specifically sites that have these apps. If you're on Shopify, have these apps installed for ADA compliance, or the plugin if you're on WordPress, and they're specifically scanning just hordes of sites to figure out which ones have it, and then they go check deeper, and they're just trying to make cash, and it sucks. But
I know as a WordPress developer, I can go to a website and I can see every site that either I have made or someone else has made using my theme. I can see an entire list. I got their website address. I can look at what plugins they're using with my theme. I can see all kinds of stuff, and this is open source because it's open source, it's public. You just need to know where to go. And I know where to go because I made my theme, and I just know these things after 12 years of doing this. And do you not think, if I know that some savvy guy working at some law firm who's an ambulance chaser knows how to do that too?
Yeah.
And then just look for WP plugins that address ADA, and then actually look at the site and do they really cover it?
Did they even use the plugin?
Right. Is it active?
Just installed it.
Right.
There's several projects that even WordPress themselves have created that people don't know. Like, you were using one the whole time, and I told you in an email the other day, I said, yeah, that's a WordPress project, because you looked it up to see if this site had analytics on it. And you were like, lies.
Built with.
Yeah. And that is that's backed by Automatic.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. So you have like all these other quiet little monsters. WordPress is a very big animal. And that's why it's like, if I'm going to resolve something with ADA or create something to make it compliant, if WordPress is chosen, I'm like, phew, it doesn't solve the issues of ADA, but it solves a lot of the mechanics that are needed to.
Right.
And that's the big thing about it. Whereas with Shopify and other tools, they're more they're not open source, they're closed. So it's proprietary. You don't really know if they are.
Mm-hmm.
You really don't. You're just kind of like,
they come out with a statement.
Yeah.
And you just have to kind of trust them.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm not saying they would be malicious about it, but
Right.
still, it's up to you to figure out if it is or not. And Shopify right now, a lot of people have Shopify sites. A lot of people are selling product online. Have you thought about this? Because now we're getting through this pandemic that's kept everybody busy, including government agencies. Well, this summer, that obviously, as of this month, that's changed according to the Department of Justice.
Lock your doors.
Yeah, seriously, yeah. It's one of those things that when it popped up a couple weeks ago, I was like, oh wow, this is back, because I hadn't seen it since 2019 or 18. I mean, Mitch and we were at a place that was working and had some client sites that were, said they were compliant, but after reviewing them, I was like, no, they're not.
Nope.
Right.
And that was one of the reasons why years ago, I mean, Laura has moved on and we always have appreciated her involvement, but she and I know this stuff. We know the tools. We've always had the capability for this. Now I have to all right, we got to get more familiar with this now and get caught up, because it is something that's very subjective in some senses. But legally, it's really not. Like again, I can't say enough that the Justice Department doesn't have really any teeth. They just say guidelines. Eventually, those civil rights groups will have the teeth to say, if you do not have this, they can shut your site down.
Yeah. And shouldn't take that either. I mean, there's a lot of people with disabilities, and like you said, we're not talking about the most severe disabilities. They could be temporary. I know you've said that many times. Somebody could break an arm or, even worse. But it's temporary. They're going to heal. But they need the website has to be usable for them in that time period that they are temporarily disabled.
Yeah. I mean, if you're struggling, if you have a person that has an immune deficient problem, HIV, cancer, whatever, they fall into this.
Right.
If your website is complicated, guess what?
Yeah, they don't.
Not compliant.
They don't specify what disabilities.
No, they don't. But this site in beta does have a list of these things. And again, like I said, we'll include a link in the description on YouTube, which hopefully if you go to YouTube and do that, you'll like and subscribe and, keep following us and click the bell and do all those things.
Get the finger guns.
Yeah, get the finger gun. You can actually see the finger guns if you do it.
Pew, pew, pew.
I know this episode's a bit serious because I'm looking at Robert in the booth. Robert's got this look on his face like, oh, crap, this really took a turn.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, but it is something that's, has unfortunately been used to scare people into a sale of services. And that's not right, because and it is expensive to do remediation. As I've said, I use the mold analogy a lot with your house, because I think a lot of people kind of understand that. I mean, your website is the house that holds, basically that's the hub. Mitch, you've shared it before, like
Your front door.
Yeah, this is it. This is Diana Richardson from SEMrush has said that is your business now. And so that's something that, has to be considered. If you're going to have a brick and mortar, you're obviously considering accessibility. But a website is never really thought of by a business owner about its accessibility. And it's, now there's like a lot of sites out there. There's a lot of things, and I can spot them. I can see that I can run the tool I can run several tools and go like, boom, that's not there. And some of these tools will recommend what to fix, but to be honest with you, unless you know how to code, some of those you can't. It's just beyond your, frankly, ability. It's like you said, it's layman.
Not a do-it-yourself task.
It is not. It is something that requires somebody that understands the either the platform, the code, how it's used. This is not a task for your marketing director. This is not a task for your communication director. It's not a task for anybody other than your web developer. Because your web designer, they design sites. It's in the title.
Right.
They know CSS, HTML, and light JavaScript, and that's it. That's basically the base qualifications, in my opinion, of a web designer, other than being able to design the site and visuals. But a web developer specializes in front-end and back-end code, depending on what kind they are, front-end developer or back-end developer. So your front-end developer should be the person that you're going to and saying, like, dude, are we okay?
You ever heard of this?
Yeah, and that's kind of my job, actually.
Have you seen this before?
Yeah, and that's kind of my job in the company is I guess, I don't want to put it on my title, but like CTO, I guess. But yeah, it's something that's cropping up, and I kind of figured that. It was just one of those things I didn't expect to happen so fast. I was like, maybe April, June. And then the article came up and I was like,
Here we are.
here we are. Yeah. In fact, I got to give credit to Edge Employment for posting it on LinkedIn.
Mm-hmm.
So, Mary, if you're out there, give credit to Edge Employment because they posted on LinkedIn like, hey, did y'all notice this? And I was like, oh, yeah, that happened like this month in March.
The Ides of March.
The Ides of March. Anyways, you guys got anything?
I mean, no, it just highlights. I mean, in web, it seems that it's always an ever-changing landscape anyway, because the technology changes, the languages change, the tools change. This just adds one more aspect to the whole web universe that just proves it's vitally important that you're dealing with someone that understands these things and kind of has your back when it comes to these pending regulatory issues that are taking place, because you need somebody that's got some depth, not just in, I mean, as a branding agency, that's an aspect of your branding. It isn't top of mind necessarily for everybody.
Right. It is for us.
But because we have someone who has so much depth in web, because we understand the vital part that web plays in your branding. Well, this is just a natural, it's a natural attachment to that. I mean, it has to do with functionality and adequately communicating with the marketplace and the rules that are there to follow. And if you're dealing with somebody that doesn't have that, then you're not doing yourself any favors.
Yeah. Well, and then as in the web, I may be adept at it, but I'm going to look to Mitch for the brand guide that he's creating so that I understand that that's the color. Mm-hmm. I understand that these are how buttons look. Like, that's how in depth it gets. It gets into the UI kit of a site. This is the font, and this is the size of the font for a heading. This is the size of a font for this. Because the method behind that is not design. The method behind design is actually a very cold and calculated animal. It's not, I make pretty things. It's like these things have a purpose.
What do we say?
Yeah, there's a reason this is 18 pixels and not 12. Right. So there's intention behind that, and that's one of our qualities and values is everything's intentional that we do, and that's a part of that. And I look to that. If I was putting the site together, that's what I'd look to. Like, what is the guidance? Because fonts are different.
Yep.
They all have different weights as well, different thicknesses. Like, go to a font, look at a font in Google Chrome, and then open up Firefox and go like, well, that's what happened. That 1 or 2 pixels makes a difference.
Oh, yeah.
And it's the same weight and the same font, but that's a thing. So imagine on your phone and all the devices out there how that looks. Does the screen reader work on your mobile phone? Do you have one? Is your theme built for that? That's actually a script thing that happens. And so
all these permutations that your web has to satisfy is not something I think a lot of people sit and give a lot of thought to when they think of their branding.
Yeah.
But if you don't have the time to do it, you need to find somebody that does.
Yeah.
And that was my point too, is it's not just a small sliver of the market. It's a sizable chunk of your consumers and your customers and clients that probably experience some form of disability.
Yeah. I mean, you put out an ad. Yeah, you're in marketing and doing the experience for our customers. I mean, if you work with Mitch and put out an ad and write the copy and is the font readable? Can they actually, like the line height between lines, is that something that works?
Is the landing page we're driving them to, is the form going to be completable?
Yep.
Yeah.
That's a word.
Yeah, and that's a very important thing because there's a rule. The internet's made of forms. Surprise! And that, how they look, like the asterisks, like required fields. Mm-hmm. That's important. You got to be ADA compliant on all your forms. So that means if you have a placeholder text that says, please type, guess what? No, no, you got to have a label. I know it sucks from a design perspective, but you got to have it. So there's all kinds of things to cover that are in the minutia, but that's something that you hire us for to make sure that's there. So we're not going to cover an entire podcast on that. But anyway, now that you're terrified,
you're welcome.
You're welcome. Go
have a great weekend.
Yeah, have a great weekend.
We're much nicer than attorneys, though.
Yeah, we are.
Most days.
And we'll talk to you about Batman because that was a good movie. So, anyways, what? Robert just got a stink eye from Robert. Robert's like, you didn't like it? Did you see it? You did.
That sums it
No
up.
comment.
No comment. Okay, dokey. Well, there is a deleted Joker scene that's out on YouTube. You should go watch, and maybe that'll change your mind.
Didn't help.
Seen it.
Seen it. Still don't. All right. Anyways, if you enjoyed this podcast, please like, subscribe, find us on YouTube. You also go to nerdbrandagency.com/podcast to watch the latest episode and some others of us blathering on about things that you may like or may not like or just enjoy. I want to thank all of our listeners. I have met some of you in person. I've really been appreciative of some of you, like some folks at the chamber. As you're walking your dog, you're probably listening to this right now going like, I told him last week I was like listening and walking my dog. And we hear you. We know you and we see you.
And we appreciate you.
Anyways, you can also find us on social media everywhere at NerdBrand Agency. And, we'll see you next week. Remember, keep your nerd brand strong.